Well, good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. I welcome the gallery and welcome him to the Cranbourne area in the city of Casey. He was inducted last Wednesday to the Uniting Church in Cranbourne, a wonderful man, and I know will be a great blessing to our community, as we hope we are to him. So please stand as I call upon Reverend Ray McCluskey from the Uniting Church Cranbourne to read the prayer.
Well, good evening, and thank you for the opportunity of reading the Christian prayer. What I would say is, for those of you who aren't Christians or from other faiths or of no faith, I'd hope you hear my words to you tonight as encouragement for the work of council, its officers, on behalf of the citizens of Casey. Let us pray. Gracious God, we ask you to give your blessing to this council, guiding us so that the decisions we make might truly be for the well-being of the people of the city of Casey, and we pray this in your blessed name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend McCluskey, and thank you for coming at such short notice. Please remain standing as I call upon Robin Zeddens from the Casey Multi-Faith Network to read the faith statement.
The Casey Multi-Faith Network exists to promote peace, harmony and understanding, and to do so in partnership with Casey Council and the wider Casey community. We aim to spread knowledge and clarity about what different religions or worldviews believe, teach and practice. We believe that all members of religions and faiths have the right to peacefully practice and celebrate their own religion in a shared attitude of friendly coexistence and cooperation with all other people.
Thank you very much, Robin. Please be seated. The City of Casey acknowledges that we are on the traditional land of the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people and pay respect to elders past and present. Apologies. We have an apology from Councillor Gillich, and I think we have a full contingency otherwise. Is there a mover and a seconder to accept the apologies of Councillor Miller Gillich? So moved by Councillor Thrace, and seconded by Councillor Cristani. Is there any dissent? There being no dissent, that is carried. Is there a mover and a seconder to move the suspension of local law until I determine to reapply the local law? Sorry, moved by Councillor Aziz, seconded by Councillor Jackson. Is there any dissent? There being no dissent, that is carried. Councillors, I move to acknowledge the life of Greg Kelly. Gregory Raymond Kelly, a wonderful husband and father and grandfather, an accomplished and well-known business person, owning two butchers, one in Cranbourne Park Shopping Centre and the other in the main street of Tooradin, and also the president of the Tooradin Dalmore Football Netball Club. Today we celebrated Greg's life at a memorial service at the Cranbourne Racecourse where near 500 people attended to hear the testimonies of people who he has helped, encouraged, employed, shared his love of football with his friends and his family, and as a family man who was so loved by all his family and his whole community. I feel this warrants his recognition by us here at Council and throughout the City of Casey. Our thoughts and prayers are with Greg's family and his beloved football netball club and his business staff at Kelly's Meats. Are there any people wanting to make any comments at all about? I know how well known and how well loved he was. On that note, I ask that we stand for a minute's silence as we reflect on a great man who was so loved and valued by our community and someone that we will not forget. Thank you very much, everyone. Please be seated. Before I ask if there's any other items of business within the suspension of local laws, I would like to point out that the City of Casey have got a new and improved front banner on the City of Casey website with a button that you just have to click, and it takes you through to show you all the Australia Day events. It also gives you the Mayor's message for Australia Day. So please, I encourage you to please go on the City of Casey website, have a look at this wonderful banner. It's very easy to use, and it'll tell you about all the fabulous Australia Day events that we've got coming up on this Saturday. Are there any other items in suspension of local laws? That being the case, I now determine the local law be reapplied. Confirmation of minutes. Is there a mover and seconder to confirm the minutes of the council meeting held on Tuesday, 18th of December 2018? Moved by Councillor Rowe, seconded by Councillor Aziz. Is there any dissent? There being no dissent, that is carried. Declaration by councillors of any conflict of interest or personal interests pursuant to sections 79 and 79B of the Local Government Act 1989. Do any councillors have a conflict of interest or personal interest that they wish to declare? Officers' reports. Are there any items councillors wish to discuss in our reports this evening? And I'll start with Councillor Aziz.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Item 6.1.
Thank you, Councillor Aziz. Councillor Smith.
Madam Mayor, number 2, 3 and 13.
Fantastic. And I'll be withdrawing items 7.4 and 7.8. Councillor Saray.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's 7.9. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Saray. Councillor Cristani.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. 7.10, please.
Thank you so much, Councillor Cristani. Councillor Ablett.
Madam Mayor, 7.12, thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other items for withdrawal? That being the case, could I please ask for a mover and a seconder to adopt recommendations listed in the officers' reports that have not been withdrawn for discussion as follows? Items 7.5, 7.6, 7.7, item 7.11, moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Rowe. Is there any dissent? There being no dissent, that is carried. Public question time. Each question will be read out and then an answer given. There is a limit of 2 questions per person. Members of the public are not permitted to comment. Members of the public can contact council staff during office hours to discuss any issues that they might have. Now, I was just wondering if I could ask the Director, are there any questions this evening?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there has been one question received this evening from Michael Drew. Is Mr Drew in the gallery? Thank you for your question. The question reads, problem with parking in Kangan Drive, Berwick, near the new hospital. Council is making a lot of money from badly signed posts. My question to Council is, when will this practice stop? 13 drivers fined in one morning. When will Council admit there is a problem, or will they just ignore and continue to make money from this practice? This question will be answered by Caroline Bell, Safer Communities Manager.
Through you, Madam Mayor. The management of parking within the City of Casey is increasingly complex due to the population pressures the municipality is facing. Last year, Council adopted a citywide parking strategy which provides direction as to how Council aims to manage and govern parking within both commercial centres and residential streets. To manage on-street parking, one of the 4 tools at Council's disposal outlined in the strategy includes parking enforcement, where parking compliance officers patrol time limit restrictions and particularly accessible parking bays in order to maximise the available parking in key locations. These officers monitor and patrol the Kangan Drive area frequently and will continue to do so in the future. As outlined in a media release issued on the 26th of November 2018, the City of Casey introduced new parking restrictions along Kangan Drive in response to the community's concerns and frequent complaints regarding the increase in congestion and travel time delays. Council undertook transport modelling for the wider Berwick Health and Education Precinct, which indicated that the removal of on-street parking along the stretch of road would provide benefit to the ongoing congestion issues within the precinct. And as a result of that transport modelling and in response to ongoing community concerns, Council put in place parking restrictions in July 2018. Council officers also undertook an inspection of the signage in Kangan Drive last week and confirmed that the signage complies with the Australian standards. However, to further increase the understanding of these restrictions, a doubling of the statutory signage will be introduced in coming weeks, together with further advisory signage. The statutory signage will then have a spacing of approximately every 20 metres. Council acknowledges the demand for parking along Kangan Drive to service a number of businesses in addition to the hospitals. However, these restrictions were necessary to improve traffic flow for vehicles approaching the Clyde Road intersection by allowing traffic to fully utilise the 2 travel lanes approaching the intersection. Council encourages drivers to familiarise themselves with parking restrictions in all locations to ensure compliance with parking requirements. And we will continue to advocate and support the state government in delivering improved public transport services to provide alternative options to travel across Casey, especially improved bus services to railway stations and better accessibility to activity centres, education and health precincts to try and alleviate issues like this occurring. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Bell, and thank you to Mr Griffin and your team. Could you please convey our gratitude for the work that you've done in a very short period of time with what I think will be some very satisfactory outcomes. I'm now going to defer to the Ward Councillor, Councillor Jackson, and I know that he and Councillor Saray have been working very hard on this matter as well.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on this, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, when the first issue in terms of signs got raised to me, I had a look at it. And in my view, it was relatively clear. There's a long history in Kangan Drive, a history of us meeting with the retirement villages, meeting with the hospitals, meeting with concerned people who were getting jammed and logged on that road, not being able to get from their school to work in time and having to get kids up early just to get them to school up there. Madam Mayor, I won't allow for an ambulance to be stuck on Kangan Drive during peak hour periods not to reach a hospital. The signs are absolutely needed. They're done by modelling. I thank the officers for the additional sign which goes above and beyond our requirements, in fact double our requirement under statutory obligations, and I thank them for that. I think perhaps and I had a look, Madam Mayor, of Star News published this article and published a number of Facebook comments on it, and myself having a look over it, I think there were about 90% of comments that could see the signage that was clear, and only some that couldn't. But also, I think, Madam Mayor, it's a real argument to say that we should be encouraging, or we should be advocating rather potentially to state governments of public hospitals to have parking free at public hospitals, rather than forcing the people that attend public hospitals to park on the road. I think that's probably much better where we direct our time and energy in relation to this. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. I would like to say again, the work that the officers have done is sensational, and there will be some additional, non-required, but certainly committed to signage, which will really make it very clear to those parking there that there is a time restriction and also a time when they can't park there at all. So thank you very, very much for that. And as there are no further questions, I'll move on to officers' reports withdrawn for discussion, and I'll call upon Councillor Aziz to talk to us about Smart City Advocacy Committee meeting.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation in my name.
And I meant advisory. I'm sorry about that, Councillor Aziz. So moved by Councillor Aziz and seconded by Councillor Jackson.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. And at the outset, in introducing this report and the recommendations and the wonderful work that this committee does, I'd like to also acknowledge the great work that's being done by my two colleagues, Councillors Rowe and Jackson, in this all-important portfolio, as well as the outstanding work that is being done by the administration under the leadership of Clint Alsop. It's just been an amazing journey so far in transforming Casey into a smart city in its own accord, but also setting it up as a model for the rest of Australia for other cities to evolve, following the many great footsteps we're taking. And they have been quite exciting, Madam Mayor. In the last advisory committee meeting to which these minutes belong, we had a visit from Dr. Jeremy Novak, who is a professor in the Faculty of Engineering in Southern Cross University in Queensland. And there's a gentleman that I actually met when I travelled on behalf of Council to Singapore to the World Cities Summit at the exclusive invitation of the Singaporean government. And looking at the work that his university is doing in developing what is called the maturity model, where cities can actually measure themselves in terms of their strategies to become smart cities against the model. And it will touch on things like governance. And the great thing about Casey is that before we spent a cent in that space to develop Casey, we got all our governance ducks in a row. And we're probably more prepared than any other city in Australia with the philosophy, the strategy, the governance framework, and a range of other measures that require the city to evolve, if you like, as an initial platform. Obviously, when we're talking about smart cities as well, we're talking about technology, and the possibilities in that space are endless. We're looking at cognitive technology at the moment, namely using artificial intelligence to handle our customer service interface with the Casey public. And the technology that's been developed is so amazing. It's already deployed in councils in the United Kingdom. And the robot involved, her name is Amelia, presents as a real person and is of such capability and cognitive intelligence that she can recognise when customers are angry, she can recognise when customers need to have more than one query fulfilled and so on. It's not about replacing our people at the customer service interface. It's actually about creating greater productivity so that these people can actually do other functions which this robotic technology can't handle. And the final thing I want to mention, Madam Mayor, is finance. So, you know, governance, technology, finance. In this all-important space, councils can't go it on their own. They actually need the assistance of other levels of government, but they also need to deploy great things that are already in train in Casey, such as public-private partnerships. We need the private sector to come and invest with us to create a smart city, and so many industries in Casey and so many businesses now are actually walking down that track. And I'm very proud of the fact that I've been appointed by this council on the Power Plant Strategy Board. Now that's a company that's using drones to inspect electrical infrastructure in places as far away as northern Western Australia and where they have contracts. So it's a Casey-based company doing work, you know, that far away in Western Australia and using drone technology to do it. So it's an exciting world. Yesterday, those that have been watching the news would have seen the introduction of allowing legally self-driving cars on our roads in South Australia. That's going to become a reality within a couple of years. So the world is changing, industries are changing, and Casey is right there, thanks to the will of this council, the political will, and the outstanding capability of our staff to bring the future to us today. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Aziz, and if I could just thank you and thank Councillor Rowe, Councillor Jackson, but also Mr Alsop and his wonderful, wonderful team. This is groundbreaking stuff, and we're right up there with the best of them, and that's what I'm really proud of, if not a little bit further ahead. Are there any questions or any dissent? That being the case, I'd like to move the recommendation. So that was moved by Councillor Aziz, seconded by Councillor Jackson. That is carried. Now move on to the next item, and that is Councillor Smith, Arts Development Funding.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I promise to not talk as much as Councillor Aziz did.
So moved by Councillor Smith, as is, or are you?
As is, no, as is. I just want to make a couple of comments. Can I acknowledge in the audience or the gallery tonight, we've got Pauline George, and I'll introduce Pauline if you don't know her. She's a part-time resident of Casey because she spends most of her life on cruise ships. She's, it's nice to have her back in the country temporarily.
We've been on holidays with you, Pauline, I can tell you. We've really enjoyed it.
Pauline,
so moved by Councillor Smith and seconded by Councillor Rosario.
Pauline is a member of the Voices of Casey. I think she's the representative of Jonathan Welsh in terms of administrator. And I'd really want to pull this out to acknowledge two things. One is our arts community have really embraced the arts development funding, where they had to apply every year and a bit of uncertainty each year whether they're going to get funding. They now have certainty over X number of years, and the beneficiaries of that are certainly grateful for that, and it helps them in their forward planning. But also I wanted to pull this out to acknowledge the work of Dr. Jonathan Welsh, who's well known to this city, and I regard him as a good friend and knows he doesn't live in Casey, and I have a go at him every time I see him because he often talks about he spends more time in Casey. He and his husband and children, they live over in Tullamarine, and he often says he should move to Casey, and I said yes, you should. So we might need to work on that to get him over here. But Jonathan is well known through the School of Hard Knocks and all the documentaries on television and things that to do with that. He's now moved away from that and formed the Pay It Forward organisation, and it is, as the officers have said accurately in the report, that the funding that was allocated to School of Hard Knocks is more appropriate with the new organisation of Pay It Forward. And we look forward to having Jonathan back running his workshops, etc. Councillor Abbott, remember, he was a fantastic performer at the mayoral concert last year, not only conducting the choir but also performing as a solo artist. That was, he's always a pleasure to be around, and I take great pleasure in saying that I'm a friend and admire his work. So, councillors, I commend the report to you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. And he sang Happy Birthday to me one year on stage at Beacon Hills College, I think it was. No, Hillcrest. Thank you, Councillor Smith. Are there any questions or any dissent? That being the case, that is carried. Councillor Smith, item 7.3.
Move the recommendation.
Moved by Councillor Smith, second by Councillor Rosario.
People have gone through this. I'm sure councillors have been enthralled by it and know all the things that are going in. I really want to bring this up as sometimes as councillors we attend meetings and we might be appointed to committees or groups, and sometimes you think, oh, I'm just going to go there and I'm going to cop it again. There's going to be criticism. This is a fantastic committee to be part of because the users of the Factory Rehearsal Centre are, in our city, probably the happiest group of performing arts groups that anyone would have anywhere, because that centre is just so well run. Andy, our manager down there, is well loved and is such a great organiser and negotiator and communicator. And also, I was sitting in the meeting the other day. I think the rehearsal centre is 15 years old, I think, from memory. And it looks no different than the day it opened. It is such a well-maintained building. The floor is always immaculate. The walls are always freshly painted. The users down there do treat it as their home. It is their second home for most of them. And I just wanted to point that out to councillors that I'm glad that the Mayor, Councillor Stapleton, is behind me in pushing for, if we can't get a second factory, which we know we need, at least let's work on the one we've got and improve it. So councillors will no doubt hear more about that in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Are there any questions or any dissent? That is carried. I'm withdrawing item 7.4, Cranbourne Public Hall, just with a slight amendment, and that is a second item under the report be noted, and that would read that that a report come back to council once a meeting has been conducted with Pauline Richards MP, with next steps and potential outcomes. Moved by myself and seconded by my ward partner. Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Councillors, just very quickly, a lot of work has been done by council officers, and could I say thank you? Thank you so much. This isn't an easy issue. There's a beautiful historic hall on state government land that is maintained by council. It's as simple as that. We are maintaining it in a rate capping environment. I'm very cognizant of the fact that council's no longer of the will to be funding things that aren't council specific. However, we've seen the need to assist the Cranbourne Public Hall, and certainly in terms of advocacy. There is a real will in the community to restore this hall to its former glory and to make it bigger and better. So I think a meeting with Pauline Richards MP will be very provident, and let's just see where we can go from here and what we can do as a council to assist. So thank you to the council officers. Thank you to my fellow councillors for always supporting this issue when I raise it in council, and I put this to my fellow councillors. Is there any dissent? No, there being no dissent, that is carried. We're now moving down to managing the municipal industrial landfill levy, which is moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Saray. Thank you very much, Councillor Saray. I'm just urgently looking for my notes. I move this. I've moved that and seconded by Councillor Saray. I just wanted to just talk to this briefly and to mention that on behalf of its residents, Council pays the state government the landfill levy of $64.30 for every tonne of waste sent to landfill, and that equates to around $4 million per year. And this is, it's not the first time that I've raised this issue in Council. This is one that is probably it sticks in the throats of MAV delegates as well as the Municipal Local Government Waste Forum. We're all very cognisant of the amount of money that we're paying to the state government. This money, which comes from the waste services charge on the City of Casey rates notice, goes to the Victorian Sustainability Fund. Successive state governments have failed to adequately redistribute the funds raised by the levy and instead have accumulated more than $550 million. The VAGO, which is the Office of the Auditor General, Victorian Auditor General Office, audit vindicates that the long-held criticism of the inadequacies of the redistribution of these funds. I welcome the findings of the 14 recommendations made to the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, and I know that Mr Jansen and council officers feel the same. And I'm encouraged that all recommendations have been accepted and look forward to seeing the funds increasingly spent in areas of waste management and greenhouse abatement. And this could be the opportunity to really see new technology for waste disposal and management in our municipality and in others. I believe that $5 million has now been committed through the Metropolitan Waste and Resource Recovery Group to assist councils in the southeast to transition away from landfill through a procurement of advanced waste processing. And this is just an example of the great advocacy in the work by Mr Jansen and his team. They are a mighty, mighty department. They don't make a lot of noise, but boy, they do a lot of work. I think they just put all their energies into thinking about doing things smarter, better, more economical, and also to working so very hard. So could you please extend our gratitude to your team? Thank you, Mr Jansen. On that note, are there any questions or is there any dissent? That being the case, that recommendation is carried. We're now moving on to item 7.9, Soldiers Road Bridge, Berwick. Councillor Saray.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to move this in my name with an additional dot. Oh, you've already put it in there. Yeah, fantastic. It's already
So
there.
let's move by Councillor Saray, and the additional dot point is
that officers investigate the cost of widening the bridge as well as the Soldiers Road for future planning.
Who would like to second that? Councillor Jackson? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Now, could I introduce? Yeah, fantastic. Look, this is an issue that was brought up by a resident who was concerned about a lot of the school students that are walking from Beacon Hills down into Berwick, into Eden Rise, about the footpath. However, I think thinking long term, it does say in the report that the bridge actually is Vic Roads, and that the only part that we maintain is the footpath. If we'd like to do any changes, the full cost would probably come to us. So I think maybe full time, in preparation for our future growth, in particular with we've got Helbury, Beacon Hills, St Francis, the two hospitals, Woodlands retirement villages, plus the residents, plus the new residents at Minter Farm Estate. I think planning for the future is very, very important right now. It is congested, as Councillor Crestani would know. Do your children go? Yeah, her children go to Beacon Hills Secondary College. Hillcrest, sorry, yeah. And so even the people using going from Hillcrest, which is in Clyde North, use Soldiers Road. So I think this is an opportunity to think about this road long term and to potentially ask for funding, which is very important at a state and federal level with elections coming up. So it's very important. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Saray. Wonderful advocacy. Are there any questions or any dissent? That being the case, that is carried. Now we're moving on to Councillor Crestani. Item 7.10, Prospect Hill Road, cul-de-sac permanent closure.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move this in my name.
Moved by Councillor Crestani and seconded by Councillor Ablett.
Thank you, Councillor Ablett. I'll just be brief. Madam Mayor, this is a result of a 9-month campaign to address a concern for the local residents about hooning issues along a long stretch of road at Prospect Hill Road, as well as the antisocial behaviour occurring at the cul-de-sac at the end of the road. This, after the officers implemented a 6-month closure of the cul-de-sac, it has actually had an amazing outcome. We have had no hooning complaints, and it has reduced the antisocial behaviour to a high degree. So the concern of how it's going to affect the residents and the wider community, and on the outside assessment, it found that the benefits for closing to remain permanent closed far outweighed any cons for keeping it open. So, Madam Mayor, I'm really grateful that we've had a positive outcome. It means that we don't have to look at traffic calming devices for the road either, which I don't think were on the table anyway. And so this has actually addressed a few issues. So, on one point, we like to open roads, but on this occasion, we do need to close roads occasionally. So, thank you for the officers for your time. Thank you, Mr Griffin, for your work on this and your team. And it's been a great outcome. So, thank you very much.
And thank you, Councillor Cristani. Are there any questions or any dissent? That being the case, that is carried. We're moving on to item 7.12, Councillor Ablett. That's inability to secure land for sports facilities.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move an alternative recommendation in my name, please.
Councillors, if you... Yep, okay, we'll just have a quick read before we get a seconder. And
I'm moving an alternative one.
we
defer
we're
them.
just preparing it now, Councillor Ablett.
Take that one down.
We're just preparing it now.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Okay.
Good.
Okay,
yes,
great. So moved by Councillor Ablett and seconded by Councillor Flannery.
Aziz?
Oh, Councillor Aziz.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I saw.
Yeah. Simple as that. We've discussed this. I think we're all in favour, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, good meetings. Any?
Deferred until the next council meeting. Yep.
Yep.
That 7.12 be deferred until.
Any questions or dissent, councillors? That being the case, that is carried. 7.13, Councillor Smith.
Madam Mayor, I'm moving the recommendation with 2 additional dot points, and I've had them forwarded through. Sorry that one was just a last minute one, just want to tidy up something.
Is that it?
Yep, I think so. Yep. So that's what
Have
I'm moving.
everybody had a chance to read that, councillors? Okay, moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Rosario.
I take the opportunity to highlight the report on Budgell Place. It was a report fitting after our initial 12 months of operation. I'm not going to go through things in that because it's pretty clear, although there's some really good points. I'm very proud to see the mayoral charity concert being there. It was a lot of work, but it was well worth it. Can I just give Miss McMahon lives and sleeps fun facts. So I've got some more fun facts about Bunjil, and importantly, it's very current. The Australian Ballet is here for the next 2 days. They're actually in the theatre right now, bumping in and having a rehearsal. But it's important to know that not only, you've got such an organisation as the Australian Ballet coming in, but it's been embraced by the community. They've sold 2,000 tickets to the 4 shows, and no doubt between now and when they happen, there'll be even more sold. That's just an amazing achievement for a complex in Narre Warren. Who'd have thought,
Nazawazza.
On opening night, Charlie Pickering called it the Nazawazza Opera House, and it's really proving to be pretty important. So that's great, and I encourage, if councillors, if you haven't organised to go, if you can possibly get there in the next 2 days, do that. Marina Pryor, who's the First Lady of Theatre Australia, she's opening the daytime music series. Her first concert's already been sold out, and there's a second performance on sale now. We've got the Asia Topa, a national festival held every 3 years at the Arts Centre. They want to work with us here to hold the 2020 festival at Bunjil. Kitty Flanagan, very well-known Australian comedian, she's already sold out, so don't even bother trying to get a ticket to that one, that's all gone. Vera Mola is an exhibition that will be a must-see, and International Women's Days events, Climb Art and Virgin Australia Fashion Festival are just a number of things that are on their way. So I congratulate our team, led by Miss McMahon, and thank her for her efforts, and I thank the team for including me in lots of events and opportunities to speak and discuss and give my view on things, and that's really important. Leading to my second point in the motion, a number of user groups, I am regularly here at events, and a lot of user groups do talk to me about, you know, these are issues we have, these are the really good things, these are some of the issues we've got concern about. And I've been talking to the officer and Ms McMahon about it, and have proposed a forum to give an opportunity for those users to offer some feedback and hear about what our future plans, etc. are. In telling Ms McMahon this afternoon that that's what I was planning, she said, it's okay, it's already been done. So I'm really just
that wouldn't be the first time.
Riding on the back of her work. So I thank her for that. I certainly want to be involved. And it's interesting that we're going to be also trying to talk to potential users, talk to people, and I know there are performing groups and operators out there who are not using Bunjil. We want to find out why. We're going to find out why they're not coming here, what can we do to get them here, because we want them, and we want the big and small groups to come. So that will be very welcomed by the user groups that have approached me and have approached council, just to give them an opportunity to have a small focus group to get together and talk about the issues. And as we know in the arts community, they welcome networking. It's a big part of our operation. And the third one simply acknowledges that the VAPAC, which is the organisation that runs all the performing arts facilities around the state, have a two-day conference in Melbourne coming up. They've asked me to present a paper on Bunjil Place, and I got asked in November and I only accepted today. I was very naughty, and I finally found the email and have accepted, and it's really just to acknowledge that and ask for officer assistance, which I've already been assured will happen. So it's a great honour for me, and it's a great honour for Casey. That group met at Bunjil last year, and they were very impressed with the place, and I spoke at that meeting, and they've asked me to come back, so it couldn't have been too bad. So, thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms McMahon. You and your team do an absolutely outstanding job, and we could actually take a good half an hour to talk about some of the achievements that we're seeing. And I know it's only going to get bigger and better into the future. But thank you also, Councillor Smith, your advocacy on behalf of Bunjil and also on behalf of the performing and the visual arts, very appreciated. And you certainly have taught us a lot here on council, and that's why we embrace the arts community so much, is because of your wonderful advocacy and the great people that they are. That being the case, are there any questions or is there any dissent? That being the case, that is carried. Councillors, are there any petitions? Are there any petitions that councillors wish to present? We did. Councillor Smith.
Mr Mayor, Madam Mayor, Madam Mayor, sorry, I had a cold. I have a letter from with I think nine names signed onto it. It's on behalf of the Windmill Theatre Company. It's an unusual petition in that it's actually praising us. It's giving us some really good positive feedback. So it's not the usual petition, and I'm very pleased to table it. But I will table it. But I'll just say quickly, Windmill Theatre Company.
Can you give us some wording first?
That the petition be received.
And a letter sent to the...
And a letter that the Mayor and Councillor Smith sign a letter congratulating Windmill Theatre Company and thanking them for their continued work in Casey.
Yep.
And I'll talk about that very briefly.
And engagement, I think.
Engagement, yeah.
Yeah, work and engagement, yep.
Sorry, I didn't prepare something earlier, ladies.
Councillor Smith.
Windmill Theatre Company I've been involved with Windmill for a long 25 or more years.
Sorry, moved by Councillor Smith, second by Councillor Stapleton.
Is that
right?
Yep. And they were based in Cardinia for a long time, in Pakenham. They had their rehearsal venue in Pakenham, their set storage and construction and costume, very well-known costume hire section out there. And they used to perform around different places in Cardinia, including halls and wherever they could perform. As they got bigger and more popular, they needed more space, but unfortunately the Shire of Cardinia was not able to provide them with that space, so they lost their rehearsal centre, they lost their sets construction and their wardrobe storage, and they've now moved into Casey. They're fully in Casey. They at one stage they had feet in 3 different municipalities, but they're exclusively Casey now. They used to perform at the Drum. They're no longer at the Drum. They are our resident theatre company at Bunjil, and hugely successful. They had the biggest ticket sales, I think, out of any production last year at Bunjil. They've just completed a near sellout. I think they had 10 seats left from a 5-show season just last weekend in the studio. And it was a stunning one, and the Mayor has graciously accepted the offer from Windmill to actually have 2 performers come and sing for us at the next council meeting, 2 young ladies who are going to perform. They really are a treasure, and we should be very grateful that they've chosen Casey as their home. But we also know that they are very grateful, and the letter talks about how when no one else seemed to want them, Casey embraced them, and they thanked the councillors and they thanked the officers who, first of all, found them a place at the factory where they could build and store their sets. They've since added on, we've got 2 add-ons down there, 2 containers that hopefully one day will make permanent in terms of a building, but at the moment that's solving some of their storage problems down there. They have their costume hire, which is a really popular costume hire place in southeast Melbourne, based at Hallam, and that does very well on a Saturday morning. Council's been a client on various occasions there, and they now rehearse at the factory as well, and that's been a really important a venue for them to get. So they certainly feel welcome there. They've been able to get grants. They've applied for grants over a long time, but because they weren't based in Casey, it was pretty hard to justify giving them some money. That's now changed, and they are getting council support, and their youth, particularly their youth-focused productions. They've got the facility at the factory. They're also really pleased to perform at our events. They performed at the Bunjil opening, the Mayoral Concert, the GP Run, Casey Carnival, a number of local carols events they've performed at. So they've gone from almost being extinct and closing down to now they are one of the Melbourne's most the premier amateur companies. To give an example, in 2018 they had 6,500 patrons come through Bunjil's doors. They were nominated for 4 Music Theatre Guilds Award, and they won one of those. But more importantly, the organisation that I'm involved in, the Lyrebird Awards, they've been nominated for 22 Lyrebird Awards in the upcoming award ceremony, and 250 members of their productions are from the city of Casey. So pretty amazing statistics, and we should be proud of it. So I'm really pleased to table this letter, and I'm sure that they would. I acknowledge that they didn't have to do this, but they've chosen to do it. They're not asking for anything. They're just thanking us for what we've done, and I'm sure they'll appreciate a letter from yourself, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smith. Thank you, and also thank you to the Windmill Company. That's just wonderful. We do appreciate it when we get constructive feedback, but we appreciate it even more when we get complimentary feedback. So that's really appreciated. Are there any questions or any dissent? That being the case, that is carried. Moving on to items of urgent business. I'm aware of 2 items of urgent business. I'll start with Councillor Smith and ask if he might let us know the reason for the item of urgent business. The
reason it's urgent is in relation to a government press release or media release issued today. Okay,
thank you. Moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by myself. Is there any dissent? That being the case, the item will be admitted as urgent business. Could you please give us the wording for the item?
The wording, it's in relation, councillors, it's in relation, I might seek some advice and some assistance. It's in relation to a press release issued by the Minister for Health today regarding being careful during the extreme heat, and it was talking about the long-held problem, regrettably, of children being left in cars in the heat. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because Casey was identified as the local government area that had the most call-outs for children being left in cars in the last 12 months. So I suppose my wording is that Council notes the press release from the Minister for Health. Anyone feel free to jump in and
I'm going to move on. I have something ahead. Wrong one. Yep.
That Council acknowledges today's press release by the Minister for Health in relation to extreme heat.
And councillors, just for your information, with the new software that we're using, we won't see it come up until we've completed it. And,
Okay.
and that's why you're looking up and seeing.
Part two would be that council prepare a media release in response to the government's press release. And the media release should highlight that council does have a history of advocacy for
Kids Safe Victoria
Kids Safe.
Partnership.
We
we actually put. I'll
Yeah,
talk to
no,
that in a minute.
you-
yeah,
you-
talk to that in a minute. Yeah.
It's it. So maybe I've lost track. Not
Sorry.
seeing it's a real problem.
Council does have a history of actively advocating.
Yep.
For,
in association with Kids Safe Victoria, maybe. Yep.
Advocating on this issue, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It's difficult when you can't see where you're
I know.
up to. I don't know.
There
I've
you
lost
are.
track.
Tricky. I think the key is that we get it in early, and that way they can come straight
And
up
that
and
a report come back to the next council meeting outlining council's response.
Could I possibly suggest an addition, and it'd be between up until the point where you said the council's got a history of that point before advocacy. That point before there, if we could put in Council Explorer, if we could reintroduce the advocacy conducted in 2016.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Comfortable with that?
Yep. Just going back to that second sentence, should they say that council does have a history of advocacy in conjunction with Kids Safe
Thank you.
Victoria?
That sounds lovely. On this issue. On this issue.
On
Yeah.
this, yeah.
Yeah.
In conjunction with Kids Safe Victoria on this
So
issue.
we're just going to have a look at that. Yeah.
Yep, on this issue. And the report come back to the next council meeting detailing or outlining the responses to this motion.
So moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by myself. Is there?
Yeah, if I could just say
would you like to
very
introduce
quickly,
Councillor Smith?
look, it'll be quick. We all know this is a really regretful thing that happens, and it's a shame that it is still happening. Council has got a history of advocacy, including signage around the place and assisting other organisations putting up signage, I believe, for Kids Safe. But unfortunately, we can't be there at every car park. We can't be there policing it. And we all wish we could, but that's just not practical. So in response to the fact that Casey has the highest number, again, it's regrettable that we're the largest city in the state, so you have to assume that not only does that mean we're going to have the most of the good things, but we're probably going to have most of the bad things, unfortunately. It's just the way statistics go. So I think we need to point out that council has a history of working in this area and advocating for it, and that we need to just maybe refresh what we have done and what we need to do in future, and maybe step it up a bit. I think that's all we need.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Aziz.
Thanks very much, Madam Mayor. I haven't seen the media release, but I wonder if Councillor Smith or perhaps the officers can enlighten us. Were the figures presented as absolute or relative? In other words, were they per capita figures or just numbers of children
Just
involved?
numbers. Just numbers.
Yeah, well, I'd like to get a per capita perspective if we can, and I wonder if Councillor Smith would entertain that we seek from the relevant department where the media release was delivered from, Jenny Mikakos, the Honourable Jenny Mikakos, where we seek an understanding of our per capita relative position, because the fact is Casey's got 340,000 residents. One child in a car is unacceptable anywhere. However, it's a bit unfair to paint Casey as having a larger problem than the others, when Casey actually has more residents than anyone else in the state. So I'd like the motion amended, if possible, Councillor Smith, to request a per capita figure for Casey and every other municipality mentioned. And I'd love to compare that. And I would...
Second point, do you think, Councillor Aziz? Make it the second one?
Second one, yeah.
Under-
That'd be amended.
Do some wording. Yeah.
The council prepare media release in response and encourage the minister. Sorry, I'm just reading the next one. So we don't need to do that because that's what the next paragraph says. Can we change that to that council's...
No, no, don't change that. Don't yet. The second one.
Let's go back to the one you've just created.
Yep. Yep. So just
that
delete
council
that.
seek.
Yep. Yep. That council seek. Yep.
From the department that issued the media release. Advice on the figures per capita for each municipality mentioned.
That's it, Councillor Aziz?
Yeah, that's it. And I'm even prepared to take the risk, Madam Mayor, now to say that I bet you, if those figures are released, that Casey drops from top position to bottom position on the per capita basis.
Do I have leave of council to accept those changes? Councillor Cristani, do you have a question or dissent?
Thank you. No, I have a question and a comment as well, but I also agree with Councillor Aziz what he said.
I can't hear you.
Oh, don't touch that, yep. I wonder whether we have enough mothers and prams car parking to help address this issue. I know it might be slightly direct, slightly indirect, but it just may be something to consider. It's really a note. Perhaps we can look at looking at that in light of increasing concern around this issue. Maybe we could do something in-house to consider what we're doing for planning and how we can. It's just an initial comment, and perhaps we can take it on board for later.
Probably advocacy in that area, I'd say, Councillor Cristani, because
scheme.
very often it's on private land, yeah. That's right. So, Councillor Ablett.
It's getting rid of a peanut.
You peanut, sit down.
No, I'm staying. I just wanted a clarification from Councillor Cristani. Are you advocating for some car parking near supermarkets for mums with babies only, and like we have disabled car parking? Is that what you're talking about?
That's right. There's some places that do it really well, and I think the area around Savers is fantastic. But there is, yeah, and some shopping centres do, but perhaps we should make it a request for a legislative requirement to provide. Fountain Gate also does mums and prams parking quite well. Yep. So perhaps just widespread consideration for it is hard. Many of the women here and the dads too have been through situations where you want to go out and do a quick shop and you've got this little ones with you. I'm not condoning any bad behaviour, and of course it's horrible when that happens. What I'm saying is it just create an environment where we can assist our residents to make better choices.
Yeah, and it's setting them up for success, isn't it? Thank you, Councillor Cristani. Are there any other questions? Could I just speak to this, because I applaud what Councillor Smith is doing. Back in 2016, we did launch a significant campaign on not leaving children, elderly and pets in cars on hot days. And it's really, really important that we don't just talk about children, we actually talk about vulnerable people in our community and those that can't help themselves, and that includes our animals. The officers went away and did some amazing work and joined forces with KidSafe Victoria. We installed signs that are still there today in our car parks. We wrote to community centres, schools, businesses, and they actually took up the initiative with KidSafe Victoria and were provided with signs that they too put up themselves. So they're not legislative signs, they are signs reminding parents and drivers of vehicles of their responsibility to ensure those that are driving in their car remain safe. So we don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel, but I do think the additional advocacy that Councillor Cristani has highlighted is important, and it would probably be mainly advocacy because a lot of it would be on private land, but very important issues. So you can check out. If you Google the campaign at the time, it was quite extensive, and Councillor Smith has got all that information. So can I say thank you, Councillor Smith, for raising this. Very, very important. Thank you for each and every one of you for your invaluable input. And I'd just ask, are there any further questions? Is there any... Sorry, Councillor Smith, would you like to
just
sum
quickly, in response to Councillor Aziz, the 5 local government areas, it talked about Between September 2017 and August 2018, there were 1,587 calls to people locked in vehicles. The majority were children under the age of 13. The 5 local government areas were Casey with 113, Wyndham 79, Whittlesea 69, Greater Geelong 60 and Hume 60. So what Councillor says is probably pretty accurate.
Yep.
But nevertheless, we can't ignore that there is an issue, and Casey's part of that issue, and we need to be seen to respond. And I think we already have responded well. We just need to update that response perhaps.
And I think
Councillor Cristani, I agree with her about the signs. I think that'll probably come, there might be an opportunity at the next month to add that to the recommendation.
And thank you, Councillor Smith. I guess the one thing that you and I talked about is the very campaign that was run in 2016. It'd be great to see that run every year between November and March. Yep. So that would be, as long as we get fine-tune that to meet today's needs, that would be fantastic. Are there any further questions? Did you want to sum up at all, Councillor Smith?
No.
Okay, that being the case, there's no dissent. That is carried. Now, the next item of urgent business is being raised by myself, and it's urgent because of timing. So, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Rosario. Thank you very much. We had a good show of hands here. So that's admitted into as an item of urgent business. I'd now like to put forward my the wording for my fellow councillors to consider. And so could I please just change the ward councillor? I'm sorry, I meant to put Councillor Jeff Ablett on the first stop point. Ward councillor Jeff Ablett. Yep.
Just where you've got Carlos, he's the EO of the foundation, not people might think he's the Casey Cardinia CEO.
Executive officer.
No, the foundation. Just add the foundation.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And you've got that one, haven't you? Yep. Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Smith. So, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Rosario. I'm sorry. Have we done that yet? No, we haven't. Sorry. The item of urgent business before us. Has everybody managed to read it? That's moved by myself and Councillor Ablett. Would you like to second it? You're welcome. Councillors, I'm just wanting to let you know that there's a wonderful Multicultural Night Festival coming up on the 29th of March, and it's going to be an absolutely fantastic event. It's running between 6 p.m. and 11 p.m, the Cranbourne Turf Club. They have kindly agreed to make the Casey Cardinia Foundation as the charity of choice. And in return, I think the least we can do is provide some in-kind support that would be very, very minimalistic in terms of officers' time and no cost, no financial cost. This is a really, really exciting event and a great opportunity. So I'm just putting it forward for my fellow councillors for consideration. Are there any questions or is there any dissent? That being the case, that is carried, and I thank my fellow councillors very much for that. That brings us to the close of our council meeting. Could I please wish everyone here a very, very happy Australia Day, a very, very happy 2019. We're going to have a great year. It's going to be busy, it's going to be fun, and we're just so grateful for everyone that attends our council meeting and is such an important part of it. So on that note, I close this meeting and I thank everyone for their input tonight. Done. I'm late.